Welcome to Shredder Fanfic. Like, subscribe, and hype video. Join members to gain early access to new videos. After the main character dies in his previous life, he gets reborn inside of Avatar, the Last Airbender. He is reincarnated as Rengoku, the Flame Hashira, and he is the brother of Azula and Zuko.
Avatar, reborn as Rengoku, the brother of Azula and Zuko. Chapter 1, The Morning Heat of the Palace. I awoke with my eyes opening sharply to the golden light that poured in from the palace windows. The sheets beneath me were thick, the fabric smooth, far finer than anything I had known in my first life. My breathing was steady. My hands were strong. My heart beat with an eager rhythm. And then it all came back. The truck. The sound of tires screaming against wet asphalt. My body breaking in an instant. Then Kyojuro Rengoku's memories, the days of harsh training with his father, his mother's words, the joy of food, the camaraderie of the Demon Slayer Corps, and his final battle against Akaza. But now, there was more. New layers settled over me. Another set of memories, crisp and whole memories that belonged to a boy born into the Fire Nation royal family. My name had always been the same, Kyojuro. Firstborn son of Fire Lord Ozai and Princess Ursa. Older brother to Zuko and Azula. I sat upright and laughed quietly to myself, my voice carrying the same booming warmth it always had. Ha! It is a fine day to be alive. From the corridor outside, the distinct sound of palace guards shifting in place reached my ears. The air smelled faintly of ash and sandalwood from the incense that burned each morning. I stood and dressed without hesitation. My red and gold royal robes fitted snugly over my shoulders. My hair was the same as always, bright golden yellow, wild and untamed, with fiery streaks of red at the tips. I remembered both the life of a swordsman and the lessons of fire bending that I had learned here since childhood. The forms were precise. The heat was a companion. My stance was always firm and open. When I stepped into the hallway, a servant straightened immediately and bowed. Prince Kyojuro. Your father is expecting you in the courtyard for the morning audience. Excellent. Lead the way. I replied, my voice filling the corridor. The walk was long, but I took in every detail. The polished floors reflected the deep reds of the tapestries. The carved dragons along the pillars had been sanded smooth from generations of care. In my old life, I had faced demons. Here, politics and war were the demons that stalked the land. But unlike the endless struggle of the Demon Slayer Corps, here the battle lines were drawn with borders and titles. We reached the courtyard. The sun was rising higher, its light turning the palace stones a bright orange. Fire Lord Ozai stood with his hands clasped behind his back, speaking to a pair of ministers. Zuko, younger and smaller than I remembered him in Kanon's later years, stood near him, shoulders tense but eyes attentive. Azula, still a child but already holding herself like a commander, noticed me first. Kyojuro, she said, voice calm but sharp. You're late. I stepped forward with a grin. I am here now, and ready for the day's duties. Zuko's lips twitched somewhere between a smile and confusion while Ozai's gaze turned to me. His eyes were heavy with expectation, weighing my posture, my tone, and perhaps even my usefulness. Kyojuro, he said slowly, the southern colonies require a military review. You will accompany General Sung next week to inspect the garrisons. Understood. I said, giving a firm nod. I will represent the Fire Nation with honor and vigor. Ozai's expression didn't change, but the faintest shift in his stance told me my energy didn't displease him. In this world, I was his heir until Azula's prodigious talent might overtake me, and I would use every day to make sure my position remained secure. The ministers bowed and left. Ozai turned back toward the palace without another word, Zuko trailing after him. Azula lingered. You're too loud, she said, but her tone lacked true criticism. She was testing me. People will think you're simple. I crouched slightly so I could meet her gaze head-on. A strong voice shows a strong heart. And a strong heart earns trust. She studied me for a moment, then smirked. We'll see if that's true. Breakfast in the royal dining hall was as lavish as ever. Plates of steamed buns, roasted meats, spiced vegetables, and perfectly grilled fish filled the long table. My appetite was as strong as it had been in my life as Rengoku. Ha! This is delicious! I declared after the first bite of pork, earning a startled glance from Zuko. Do you always have to shout? He asked. Yes. It makes the food taste better. Zuko shook his head but hid a small smile in his teacup. Azula ate in calculated silence, eyes moving between me and Zuko, no doubt weighing how to use my energy to her advantage. After the meal, my day's duties began. The first was a training session in the Eastern Yard, where royal instructors drilled us in both forms and precision strikes. My footwork was flawless from Rengoku's years of swordsmanship, though I adapted each motion for fire-bending rather than katana strikes. Instructor Lee barked, Prince Kyojuro, your strikes must be tighter. Less flourish, more precision. My precision is as sharp as my determination. I replied, then shifted into the next sequence, each kick and punch releasing bursts of flame in measured arcs. My movements were efficient, perhaps too fast for his liking, but my strikes landed with force and control. By midday, the session ended. Zuko was sweating heavily, still catching his breath. Azula looked as if she had barely exerted herself, her flames sharp and blue even at her young age. I clapped Zuko on the shoulder. Well fought, brother. Your form improves with every session. He looked at me in surprise, unused to such open encouragement. Thanks, he muttered. The afternoon brought political lessons scrolls detailing the layout of colonies, supply routes, and troop movements. Here, my Rengoku mind was forced to slow. In the Demon Slayer Corps, I had fought battles directly. In the Fire Nation, war was a machine with many parts, and I was expected to know how each piece fit together. When the lessons ended, I walked the palace corridors again, thinking about what I knew of this world's canon. My birth here changed nothing in the grand scheme yet, but I would eventually face the great tides of the 100-Year War. Zuko's banishment, Azula's campaigns, the Avatar's return, all of it was ahead. My role as the eldest brother gave me influence neither canon Zuko nor Azula had faced. And I intended to use it. By evening, I stood on the palace balcony overlooking the capital. The air was warm, carrying the smell of smoke from the city's forges. Lanterns flickered to life along the streets below. Zuko joined me quietly, leaning on the railing. You're different today, he said. Not in a bad way. Just different. I feel strong, brother. Strong and ready to face any challenge. He smiled faintly. I hope so. Father expects a lot from you. I expect even more from myself. I replied, clapping him on the back. And I expect you to keep training hard. Azula appeared at the doorway, her tone light but edged. Are you giving speeches again? Yes. Speeches are powerful, I said without hesitation. She laughed, not mockingly, but as if amused by the sheer certainty in my words, and walked back inside. The sun dipped lower. My mind turned over the possibilities of the coming months. The garrison inspection would put me in the field. It would give me a chance to see the war firsthand, to understand its machinery, and to test my skills outside the palace. I knew that every choice I made from here would ripple forward, altering my siblings' paths, shifting Ozai's expectations, and possibly changing the course of the war itself. I tightened my fists. In the Demon Slayer Corps, I had sworn to protect the innocent from demons. Here, my path was different, but my resolve was the same. Whatever trials this world had for me, I would face them head on. Chapter 2, Flames in the Training Yard. The morning began with the palace bell's deep, steady tone echoing through the halls. I woke instantly. My body was already ready for the day's work. I rose from my bedding in one movement, rolled my shoulders, and tightened my fists. The air in my chambers was warm, the faint heat from the volcanic rock beneath the capital always present. I dressed in my training attire, light but reinforced red tunic, gold-trimmed belt, and wrist guards. My hair, as always, was tied back, but it could not be tamed fully. The golden strands and red tips refused to obey. I smiled. Stepping into the corridor, I greeted the servants in my usual manner. "Good morning. I trust the day finds you well." One of them jumped slightly before bowing. "Yes, Prince Kyojuro." The training yard was already alive when I arrived. Instructors shouted corrections. Soldiers practiced forms in unison. The smell of heated stone and ash filled the air. Zuko was at one end, running through basic fire-bending sequences under Instructor Lee's watchful eye. Azula was in another corner, her smaller frame moving with precision and control far beyond her years, each strike producing sharp blue fire. "Kyojuro," Instructor Lee called. "You're to spar with both of them today. I want to see coordination, not just strength." I strode forward, voice carrying. "Excellent. I shall give it my all." Zuko looked at me nervously. "Both of us at once?" "Yes. And I expect you to do the same," I replied, placing a hand on his shoulder with enough force to make him straighten his posture. Azula arched an eyebrow. "Try to keep up." We took our positions. The instructor gave the signal. Azula moved first, a short dash to my left with a quick blast of blue fire aimed at my midsection. Zuko followed half a step behind with a direct, forward punch sending a stream of orange flame toward my chest. I sidestepped the first strike, pivoted, and raised my forearm to disperse Zuko's attack. My counter was fast, a sweeping kick that sent a low wave of flame toward them both. Azula vaulted over it effortlessly. Zuko stumbled but recovered quickly. "Good recovery, Zuko!" I shouted, circling them. Azula attacked again, this time combining two quick bursts, forcing me to block high, then low. Zuko used the opening to come in from behind, but my spin deflected his strike harmlessly to the side. The match continued, each exchange growing faster. My strikes were measured enough force to challenge them but never enough to harm. Zuko's breathing became heavier, his movements less crisp. Azula's remained sharp, though her eyes narrowed each time I blocked without much effort. After several minutes, Instructor Lee called an end. "Enough. Rest and drink water." I straightened and gave a wide grin. "Well fought. Your teamwork shows promise." Azula crossed her arms. "Zuko needs to keep up." Zuko looked down but didn't argue. I placed a hand on his back and spoke with the same volume and certainty as always. "Improvement comes with practice. And you are improving." Instructor Lee assigned individual drills next. I worked through advanced sequences, sweeping motions that combined kicks, spins, and bursts of flame from multiple angles. The strength from my former life as Rengoku carried over, making my strikes solid and balanced. When the midday break came, we sat in the shade at the edge of the yard. Servants brought chilled tea and small plates of rice and grilled eel. I ate with the same vigor I had always possessed. "Ha! This is excellent," I declared between bites. Zuko gave a faint smile. "You say that about everything you eat?" "Because it is true," I replied. "Food gives us the energy to train harder." Azula drank her tea slowly, eyes still on me. "You fight differently than the others. Stronger, but strange." "I fight with full commitment. No half-hearted strikes," I answered without hesitation. The afternoon session focused on precision. Small targets were placed at varying heights and distances. We were to hit them with controlled bursts of fire, no wasted motion. I adjusted easily, aiming each strike as though it were the final blow of a decisive battle. My hits were clean, the scorch marks centered on every target. Zuko struggled with consistency, sometimes overshooting. Azula, of course, struck every mark perfectly with her blue flames. Good. Instructor Lee said, though his gaze lingered on my stance. You have great power, Prince Kyojuro, but you must learn restraint when it is required. Understood. I replied, bowing my head respectfully. By the time training ended, sweat clung to my skin, and my breathing was steady. Zuko was exhausted. Azula still had more to give but concealed it behind a calm expression. We returned to the palace together. Zuko walked beside me, quiet at first. Then, he spoke. You make it look easy. It looks easy because I have trained every day for years. I said firmly. And you will do the same. He looked uncertain. Even if father doesn't. Father's expectations are important, I interrupted, but your own expectations for yourself are more important. Zuko didn't answer, but his jaw tightened as if holding on to my words. That evening, after dinner, I visited the smaller private training hall. I found Azula there alone, practicing advanced combinations. The light from the torches reflected off the polished floor. You don't stop, do you? I asked, stepping in. She looked at me without breaking her sequence. If you want to be the best, you can't. Then let us train together. I said, moving to an open space. We sparred. Her strikes were fast, precise, and relentless. I countered with speed and force, careful never to overwhelm her entirely. She grew more aggressive, testing my reactions. We continued until the torches burned low. When we finally stopped, she gave a short nod. You're strong. So are you. I replied without hesitation. Keep that drive, and you will become even stronger. She smirked faintly before leaving the hall. By the time I returned to my chambers, the palace was quiet. My muscles were warm from the day's work. Tomorrow would bring more drills, more sparring, and more chances to shape my siblings' paths. I knew the war outside the palace walls was constant, but here, in the heart of the Fire Nation, the training yard was my battlefield, and I would ensure Zuko and Azula left it stronger each day. Chapter 3, Steel in the Flame. The day began earlier than usual. I had asked Instructor Lee the evening before to excuse Zuko from the group session. He had raised an eyebrow but agreed when I said I would personally oversee my brother's training. The palace was still quiet when I walked down the corridor toward Zuko's quarters. The air carried the faint scent of burned incense from the night before. Guards posted at the corners straightened as I passed. I stopped at Zuko's door and knocked once, firmly. Zuko. It is time to train. There was a muffled groan from inside. After a moment, the door slid open. Zuko stood there, hair slightly messy, wearing a simple red tunic. It's barely sunrise. The early start builds endurance. I said, clapping a hand onto his shoulder. We will train until your form is as solid as the palace walls. He sighed but nodded. Fine. Where are we going? The Eastern Training Yard. It is empty at this hour. We walked together through the dimly lit halls, the golden lines of the morning sun beginning to spill over the rooftops outside. The yard was as I expected, quiet, save for a pair of guards at the far end. The smooth stone floor still held the night's coolness. I led Zuko to the center. Today, we will work on 3 things: stance, precision, and stamina. He looked wary. That sounds like a lot. It is. And you will complete it. I began with stance. Your feet must be rooted. A firm stance makes your strikes stronger. I demonstrated, planting my feet shoulder-width apart, knees bent, weight evenly balanced. My hands were open and ready. "Now you," I said. Zuko stepped into position. His stance was narrow, his knees slightly stiff. I stepped forward and nudged his shoulder. He stumbled a half step. "Too loose," I barked, stepping behind him. I adjusted his feet with firm pushes, spreading them further, bending his knees more. "There. Feel the difference?" "Yeah," he admitted. "Good. Now hold it." We stayed in that position for several minutes. I moved around him, occasionally testing his balance with light shoves. Each time he held firm, I gave an approving nod. Stronger already. Next came precision. I had brought small clay tiles from the equipment shed earlier. I set them at varying distances and heights along the yard's edge. "Your flames must land exactly where you aim," I declared. "No wild strikes. Control creates power." Zuko squared his stance, raised his arm, and punched. A burst of orange fire shot forward, striking the tile but shattering it unevenly. "Better than yesterday," I called out. "But you can be even better." We continued for nearly an hour. Each time he missed, I corrected his aim or adjusted his timing. Sometimes I would block his view for a moment before pulling aside, forcing him to adjust quickly. Gradually, his strikes grew sharper. By the end of the precision drills, his breathing was heavier, sweat running down his brow. He reached for the water jug I had set nearby. "Only a small sip," I warned. "We still have stamina training to finish." He groaned. "I knew you were going to say that." "Of course." I grinned. A warrior without endurance is like a flame without fuel. The final stage was a continuous sparring drill. We would fight in short bursts, 30 seconds of rapid strikes, 10 seconds to reset, then another 30 seconds, repeated until he could barely stand. Zuko came at me with a forward punch, then a kick. I blocked each one, countering with a controlled push of flame that forced him to step back. "Keep moving!" I shouted. "Do not slow down!" He pushed forward again. His strikes were still raw but more confident than the day before. His breathing grew harsher, but he kept attacking. The sun had climbed higher by the time I finally called a stop. Zuko bent forward, hands on his knees, catching his breath. I clapped him on the back hard enough to make him straighten. "Well done, brother. You have worked hard today." He looked at me tiredly but managed a small smile. "Thanks. I think." "There is no thinking," I replied. "You are stronger than when you woke this morning. That is fact." We sat in the shade at the yard's edge, drinking water in slow sips. The guards had changed shifts during our training, and the sounds of the city beyond the palace walls were now faint but present. Zuko finally spoke. "Do you really think I can get as strong as you?" I turned to him without hesitation. "Yes. If you train hard every day, you can surpass me." He blinked at that. "Surpass you?" "Of course," I said with certainty. A teacher's duty is to make the student greater than himself. He didn't reply right away, but I could see the thought settling in his mind. After resting, we walked back through the palace halls. Azula was waiting near the dining hall entrance, a plate of sliced fruit in her hands. "You were gone a long time," she said. "What were you doing?" "Intense training," I announced. Zuko showed great endurance. Azula smirked faintly. "We'll see if that endurance holds tomorrow." Zuko gave her a quick glare but said nothing. We entered the dining hall together. The midday meal was simple rice, roasted duck, and vegetables. I ate with my usual enthusiasm. "This is delicious," I declared, setting my cup down firmly. Zuko rolled his eyes but couldn't hide a small smile. Azula shook her head, though her eyes flicked toward me in mild amusement. The afternoon was spent in political studies, but I found my mind returning often to Zuko's earlier question. His doubt in himself was clear, but so was the determination I had seen in the yard. It was not yet the unshakable will needed for great strength, but it was a start. When the lessons ended, I sought him out again. He was sitting near the koi pond, idly tossing crumbs to the fish. Zuko! I called, striding over. Tomorrow, we will begin again and push harder. He looked at me with a mix of resignation and something close to eagerness. All right. Good. Then we will see you stronger than ever. By nightfall, I was back in my chambers, cleaning my training gear and preparing for the next day. My plan was set: each morning would be ours, away from the group drills, until his stance, precision, and stamina reached a level that could withstand anything. The war beyond the palace would come in time. When it did, I intended for Zuko to face it with his head high and his strength unquestionable. Chapter 4, Brothers and Sister in the Yard. The palace bell had not yet sounded when I opened my eyes. The room was still dim, but I could already hear faint movement in the corridors, servants beginning their morning routines. I pushed myself up immediately. My body was fully awake. I stretched my arms and legs, feeling the readiness in my muscles. Today would not be like the last 2 days. Today, both of my siblings would face me together in the yard. I dressed in my training clothes: loose red tunic, gold belt, forearm guards, and light boots. The robe hung easily, giving freedom for wide, fast movement. My hair was tied back loosely, though as always the red-tipped strands at the edges refused to stay down. Stepping out into the hall, I spoke loudly to the first guard I saw. See that my brother and sister are brought to the eastern yard when they wake. The guard bowed. Yes, Prince Kyojuro. The eastern yard was cool when I arrived, the flagstones still holding the night's chill. I walked the perimeter, checking the training dummies and the weapon racks. The air was still, and the sound of the nearby fountain was the only constant noise. A short while later, Zuko arrived. His steps were steady, though his eyes still carried the faint tiredness of the early hour. You are here earlier than expected, I said, standing tall. You said we'd train again, Zuko replied. I figured I'd be ready. Good. A strong start leads to a strong day. Azula came next. She walked with her usual confident stride, chin slightly lifted, eyes already taking in the yard. You didn't say I'd be here too, she said. I did not say it, but I planned it. I replied with a broad smile. Today, we test all 3 of us together. She raised an eyebrow. You really think you can handle both of us? Yes. I answered without hesitation. And you will both handle me. We began with stretches. My voice carried across the yard with each instruction. Feet wider. Back straight. Hold the position. Zuko followed closely, his movements stiff at first but loosening as we continued. Azula's form was perfect from the start, every motion deliberate. Once the warm-up ended, I addressed them directly. This is not about winning or losing. It is about pushing each other. You will attack together. You will learn to read each other's movements. Azula crossed her arms. That sounds like you're trying to teach teamwork. Yes. Because teamwork builds strength, I said firmly. A strong team can defeat a stronger opponent. Zuko gave a small nod. Azula did not argue, but I could see her curiosity in the way she tilted her head slightly. We took positions. I stood in the center of the yard. Zuko and Azula faced me from the far side, 5 paces apart. The morning sun was now just cresting the walls, casting even light over the flagstones. Begin! I called. Azula struck first a precise blast of blue flame toward my head. I shifted left, the heat passing my cheek, and stepped forward into Zuko's range. He threw a punch with a burst of orange fire, but my forearm deflected it outward. Faster, Zuko! I barked, pivoting to block Azula's follow-up kick. She landed lightly, stepping back as Zuko circled. They came at me from opposite sides now, trying to split my attention. I welcomed it. My arms and legs moved in controlled bursts, blocking, dodging, and occasionally countering with a short push of flame. Zuko managed to land a light strike on my side, not enough to burn, but solid. Good. That is how you take an opening. I praised. Azula frowned at that and immediately pressed forward with a series of fast strikes, forcing me to back up several steps. I blocked each one, but her speed kept me from countering cleanly. Better. I said. Keep that pressure. The exchange went on for several minutes before I called a halt. All three of us were breathing harder, though I kept my voice as steady as ever. You are learning to move as one, I declared. But you can be sharper. We reset. This time, I told them they had to land 3 clean strikes on me before I could land even one on them. If I scored first, they would run 3 laps around the yard before resuming. The rule changed everything. They spoke briefly between themselves, their eyes narrowing as they planned. The second round began. Zuko attacked directly to draw my attention, his strikes more focused than before. Azula slipped around to my side, aiming low with a sweeping kick. I hopped over it, but Zuko's next punch nearly caught my shoulder. I countered with a quick burst of flame at Azula, but she blocked in time. They were adjusting faster now, not repeating the same mistakes. After 2 minutes, Zuko landed a strike to my chest clean and centered. Azula followed with one to my arm. I deflected the third, but they were closer than before. Much better, I said, stepping back. Again. We repeated the drill several times, each round lasting longer than the last. The sun climbed higher, and the coolness of the morning gave way to heat. Sweat dampened the edges of Zuko's hair. Azula's breathing was quick, but her strikes never lost their precision. Finally, on the 7th round, they succeeded 3 clean strikes without letting me land one. I raised my voice in approval. Well done. You have earned your rest. We moved to the shaded edge of the yard. Servants brought water and small bowls of rice porridge. I drank deeply before speaking again. You fought well. You learned to use each other's strengths. Azula wiped her brow. It would be easier if Zuko were faster. Zuko gave her a sharp look. I'm getting faster. Yes, you are. I said loudly, looking directly at Zuko. And you will continue to do so. Azula tilted her head. Why do you keep telling him that? Because it is true, I replied. And he should hear it until he believes it. Azula did not respond immediately. She drank her water in slow sips, eyes flicking toward Zuko once more before turning away. After the break, I set a new challenge. They were to face me again, but without speaking to each other. All coordination had to come from watching and reacting. At first, they struggled. Zuko moved too soon, Azula moved too late. But after several minutes, they began to adjust. Zuko watched her footwork, Azula read his shoulders before moving. When they finally managed to land 2 strikes in the same instant, I nodded in approval. This is the progress I wanted to see. The session lasted until the palace bell marked midday. By then, both Zuko and Azula were breathing hard, sweat visible across their faces and necks. I stood in the center of the yard and gave them both a wide grin. You have done well today. You will do even better tomorrow. Azula smirked faintly. Maybe. Zuko just nodded, but his shoulders were straighter than when the day began. We walked back to the palace together. The corridors were busier now, servants carrying trays and scrolls, ministers moving toward the audience chambers. Azula split off toward her rooms. Zuko followed me toward the dining hall for the midday meal. As we entered, he spoke quietly. "I think I learned something today." "Excellent," I said, my voice carrying through the hall. "A day is well spent when we learn." He smiled slightly. "It's not just about hitting hard." "Correct. It is about striking with purpose." We sat at the table as food was served: grilled fish, steamed greens, and bowls of fragrant rice. I ate with my usual speed, savoring each bite. "This is delicious," I said after the first mouthful. Zuko shook his head but kept eating. I could see the thoughtfulness in his expression. The lessons from the yard were settling in his mind. That was enough for today. Chapter 5, Fire Lord's Eyes on the Yard. The morning air in the palace was still when I awoke. The faint sound of sandals on stone could be heard far down the corridor, the servants beginning their day. I rose from my bed without hesitation, tied my hair back, and dressed in my training tunic and belt. Today, Zuko and Azula would join me again in the eastern yard. What I did not yet know, as I stepped into the hallway, was that another set of eyes would be on us before the day was through. The guards saluted as I passed. "Prince Kyojuro," one greeted. "Good morning," I replied in my usual strong tone. "Bring my siblings to the eastern yard after they have eaten." "Yes, Prince Kyojuro." I reached the yard early, as I always did. The flagstones were cool underfoot, and the morning light had only just begun to crest the palace walls. I walked the perimeter slowly, noting the weapon racks, the arrangement of the training dummies, and the buckets of water placed at the edges for cooling down after exercises. Within the quarter hour, Zuko arrived. His hair was neatly tied back, his training clothes well fitted. "On time." "Excellent," I said, clapping a hand to his shoulder. He gave a small smile. "I wasn't going to be late." Azula joined shortly after. Her gaze flicked from me to Zuko, her hands clasped behind her back. "I assume we're doing more group work." "Yes. We will continue where we left off yesterday," I replied. We began with stretches and stance drills. My voice carried over the yard with each command. "Lower your center. Keep your balance. Strike with your whole body." Zuko followed closely, working to keep his movements steady. Azula performed each motion sharply, her form exact. I corrected Zuko's footing twice, moving his back leg out further to give him better stability. Once warm-up was finished, I stepped back and gave the day's goal. "This morning, we will focus on control under pressure. You will face me together but with stricter conditions." Azula tilted her head. "What kind of conditions?" "Each strike must be deliberate. No wild attacks. If I block or dodge 3 of your strikes in a row, the round ends." They exchanged a glance, already planning silently. We took positions. I stood ready in the center, their eyes locked on me from a short distance away. "Begin," I called. Azula moved first, as expected, a short dash forward, low kick, followed by a palm strike releasing a controlled burst of blue fire. I stepped aside from the kick, catching the fire on my forearm guard and pushing it away from my body. Zuko came in a half-second later from my left, a forward punch releasing a burst of orange flame toward my midsection. I sidestepped and pivoted, deflecting it outward. 1. I counted loudly. Azula struck again, but this time she feinted high before aiming a blast low toward my legs. I hopped over it, turned, and deflected Zuko's follow-up. 2. I called. Zuko tried to break the rhythm, circling behind me, but I shifted with him. Azula struck once more. I caught her wrist lightly and pushed it aside. 3. Round over. They stepped back, breathing a little heavier. I smiled broadly. Good form. But you must break my defenses faster. We reset for another round. What I did not see at first was the figure standing quietly at the far edge of the yard, just beyond the open archway that led from the palace halls. Fire Lord Ozai. His hands were clasped behind his back, his posture upright, his expression unreadable. It was Zuko who noticed him first. His eyes flicked briefly toward the arch before snapping back to me. His movements grew a little stiffer. Azula saw next, though her expression didn't change. If anything, her strikes became even sharper. I decided not to call attention to it. If father was here to watch, then we would show him strength. Begin again. I ordered. This time, Zuko moved first, a controlled straight punch, followed by a quick step back to create space. Azula filled the gap instantly, her kick coming in at my side. I caught her leg, released it, and turned in time to block Zuko's next strike. 1. I called. The round was longer, neither of them wanting to give up 3 consecutive failed strikes. They coordinated better than before, alternating attacks to keep me moving. Twice they came close to landing a clean double strike. When the round ended, I gave them both a firm nod. Better. Keep this intensity. I saw Ozai's gaze shift slightly. His eyes followed Azula as she adjusted her stance, then moved briefly to Zuko. His expression remained the same, but I had learned to read small details. His lack of interruption meant he was not displeased yet. For the next round, I increased the difficulty. This time you may not step backward. All movement must be forward or sideways. Zuko looked uncertain. That's going to make it harder. Yes. Which is why we do it. We began again. The restriction forced them to change their angles, to use lateral movement to avoid my counters. Zuko adapted more slowly, but he began to anticipate my strikes better. Azula had no trouble adjusting, weaving from side to side with each attack. Halfway through the round, Zuko landed a clean strike to my shoulder, not powerful, but precise. Good. I called, even as I blocked Azula's follow-up. Ozai stepped forward slightly, still silent. The light from the rising sun caught the edge of his robes. Both siblings seemed aware of his presence now with every movement. When the round ended, I called them to the side. Servants stepped forward with water. Stronger each time. I said firmly. You adapt quickly, this is how we grow. Azula took a sip of water, then glanced toward Ozai. Father. Continue, Ozai said simply, his voice calm but carrying. As you wish. I answered at once, my tone as solid as my stance. The next 2 rounds were the sharpest yet. Every strike from Zuko was more deliberate, his footwork tighter. Azula's precision never faltered, her blue flames cutting through the air in controlled bursts. I matched them both, blocking, deflecting, and sometimes forcing them to change direction mid-attack. When we finally stopped, all 3 of us were breathing harder. The yard was warm now, the sun fully over the palace walls. Ozai stepped forward. His eyes moved between the 3 of us. Your training is more focused than I expected. Thank you, father. I said with a deep nod. They are both improving rapidly. He looked at Zuko for a moment longer, then at Azula. You will continue. Both of you. His tone carried no warmth, but his approval was in the words themselves. Without further comment, he turned and walked back toward the palace halls. The guards followed in silence. Zuko exhaled slowly once he was gone. Azula smirked faintly. He didn't criticize you, Zuko. That's rare. Zuko said nothing, but his posture straightened. I clapped him on the back. Take that as progress. Now let us eat. We left the yard together, the sound of our footsteps steady on the stone. Today's training had been different not just for them, but for me. Having the Fire Lord watch meant every movement had carried weight, every strike had been a statement. And they had met that challenge well. Chapter 6, The Long Day of Endurance. The palace bell had not yet sounded when I opened my eyes. The chamber was still, the air faintly warm from the ever-present heat beneath the capital. I sat up immediately, my body ready to begin the day. Today would be different. Not skill drills, not precision, today would be about endurance. Strength that did not fade, movement that did not slow, and control that remained sharp even after exhaustion set in. I dressed in my light training clothes, fastening the gold-trimmed belt at my waist. My boots were sturdy but thin-soled, suitable for both running and sparring. My hair was tied back, though the bright red-tipped ends still fanned out in every direction. When I stepped into the corridor, the guards posted there bowed quickly. "Prince Kyojuro," one greeted. "Good morning," I said loudly, my voice carrying. "Bring Prince Zuko and Princess Azula to the Eastern Yard as soon as they are ready." "Yes, Prince Kyojuro." The Eastern Yard was empty when I arrived. The morning air was cooler than it would be later, but the stone beneath my boots was already warm. I walked the length of the yard twice, checking that the training dummies were in place, the weapon racks were stocked, and the buckets of water sat ready in the shade. By the time Zuko arrived, I was already in stance, testing the looseness of my shoulders. "You are early." "Excellent," I said. He nodded. "I figured I should be." Azula followed shortly after. Her walk was steady, her expression calm. "You called us early again. What are we doing today?" "Endurance," I declared. "We will push until your bodies and minds are tested to their limits." Zuko's eyebrows lifted slightly. "All day?" "Yes. From now until the afternoon meal." We began with stretches and balance drills. I made them hold each position longer than usual, knees bent low, arms extended, weight centered evenly. I walked between them, adjusting Zuko's back foot when it was too narrow, reminding Azula to keep her shoulders relaxed. After stretches, we began the first trial, running laps around the yard. 20 laps. I called. "Pace yourselves but do not stop." The yard was large, and each lap took time. Zuko started strong but slowed by the 7th lap. Azula kept her pace steady, her breathing controlled. I ran with them, matching their speed, calling out the lap number each time we passed the starting point. By the final lap, both were sweating, their breathing heavier. We walked for a short time to cool down before moving to the next exercise. "Striking drills," I said, standing before the row of training dummies. 50 strikes each full force. They took their positions. Zuko struck with a burst of orange flame each time, his movements sharp at first but growing less crisp as he approached 30 strikes. Azula's blue flames remained precise, but I saw the slight change in her footwork as fatigue began to work its way in. 42. 43. "Keep going," I counted aloud. When the final strikes were finished, I had them drink water in measured sips before starting the next round of running, this time only 10 laps, but at a faster pace. "Move quickly. Keep your form," I called as we ran. By the 8th lap, Zuko was breathing heavily again. Azula's breathing was quicker now, though her stride did not shorten. When we finished, I allowed them a short rest in the shade before moving to paired sparring. "You'll take turns sparring with me," I said. 1 minute each, no pauses between. Zuko stepped forward first. His strikes were more deliberate than in past sessions, but fatigue made them slower. I blocked and countered, forcing him to adjust his guard constantly. When the minute ended, Azula was already stepping forward. Her attacks were quick and precise, forcing me to shift my weight more often, but her speed had lessened slightly from the morning's effort. We repeated the sparring rotations 5 times. By the final round, both were moving slower, but their focus had not broken. "Well done," I said, my voice as strong as when we began. "Now one final test." For the last trial, I set 3 dummies in a row and told them to destroy each one in sequence, then reset them and repeat for 5 full cycles. They would have to move quickly between targets, adjusting their stance each time. Zuko attacked first, striking each dummy with fire bursts, turning to the next without pause. Azula followed immediately, her movements sharper but her breathing heavier. By the final cycle, sweat ran down both their faces, their robes clinging slightly to their backs. Still, they finished. "Excellent," I said, walking to stand before them. "You have worked hard and proven yourselves." Zuko straightened, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "That was a lot." "Yes. And you completed it." Azula's voice was calm, though her breathing was still quick. "It was harder than it looked." "That is the point," I said firmly. "When it is hard, we grow stronger." We walked together toward the palace. The midday sun was high now, its heat pressing down on the courtyards. Inside, the cooler air of the halls was a welcome change. The dining hall was prepared when we arrived: platters of grilled meat, bowls of steamed vegetables, and fresh rice. We sat together, and I began eating immediately. "This is delicious," I said after the first bite, as always. Zuko shook his head with a small smile. Azula ate more slowly, glancing occasionally at her brother. When the meal was done, I stood. "Rest this afternoon. Tomorrow, we train again." Both gave short nods before heading toward their own chambers. Chapter 7, The Duel in the Yard. The morning began with the steady sound of the palace bell. I woke at once, sat upright, and tied my hair back. The day's plan had been clear in my mind since the night before. Today, Zuko and Azula would face each other directly. It would not be a chaotic brawl. This would be a controlled match, under my rules, with my guidance. They would fight as siblings, not as enemies, but they would fight seriously. I dressed in my training tunic and belt, stepped into my boots, and left my chambers. The guards stationed along the corridor straightened immediately. "Good morning," I greeted, my voice strong enough to echo faintly along the hall. "Bring Prince Zuko and Princess Azula to the Eastern Yard." "Yes, Prince Kyojuro." The Eastern Yard was empty when I arrived. The stone floor was dry, and the morning air was still cool. I walked to the weapon racks and moved them back several paces to clear the center space. This duel would need room. I positioned 2 water buckets at the edges in case either of them needed to cool off. Zuko arrived first, dressed in his training clothes. He looked alert but tense. "You are early." "Good," I said, clapping him on the shoulder. Azula entered moments later, her walk measured, her gaze moving briefly over the space I had cleared. "What's this?" she asked. "This," I said, "is your duel space." Zuko blinked. "We're fighting each other." "Yes. And you will do so with control," I explained, stepping to the side so I could face them both. "You will fight for 3 rounds. Each round lasts 2 minutes. There will be no wild strikes. Every attack must have purpose. If I say stop, you stop immediately." Azula's lips curved slightly. "And what if one of us wins before the round ends?" "Then the round is over." Zuko looked at me seriously. "What's the point of this?" "The point," I said clearly, "is to strengthen your skills and understanding. You will learn to read your opponent. You will learn to defend and counter. And you will learn to keep your mind clear when facing someone you know." They both gave short nods. I motioned them into the center. "Take your stances." Zuko shifted into his fire-bending stance, feet apart, knees bent, arms up. Azula moved into hers, more upright but with her weight ready to shift at a moment's notice. I raised my arm. Round 1 begin. Azula moved first, a sharp step forward with a quick burst of blue flame aimed at Zuko's midsection. He sidestepped and countered with a punch of orange fire toward her shoulder. She blocked it cleanly, pivoted, and struck again. Good defense, Zuko. I called. The first 30 seconds passed with quick exchanges. Azula pressed harder, forcing Zuko back 3 steps, but he managed to block each strike. At the 1-minute mark, he countered with a low sweeping kick, followed by a flame burst aimed at her side. Better. Keep your guard up, I said, moving along the edge to see both angles. Azula recovered quickly, stepping in with a palm strike that forced Zuko to block high, leaving his midsection open. She landed a light kick before retreating a step. Good use of openings, Azula. The round ended with neither overwhelming the other, though Azula had landed 2 clean hits to Zuko's 1. I stepped forward. Stop. First round complete. They lowered their guards. Zuko was breathing faster, Azula was steady but watching him closely. Both of you fought well, I said. Zuko, you blocked well, but your counters must be faster. Azula, your attacks were clean, but you must not underestimate his ability to defend. We rested for 1 minute before I called them back to stance. Round 2 begin. This time Zuko attacked first. He moved in with a quick step, punching forward with a burst of orange flame, then spinning to follow with a kick. Azula blocked the first strike but had to shift quickly to avoid the second. Good opening combination, I called. Azula countered with a series of fast jabs, her flames smaller but quicker, forcing Zuko to move constantly. He stepped to the side, deflecting 2, then swept his leg toward her. She jumped back, landing light on her feet. The round grew faster as they adjusted to each other's timing. Zuko's footwork improved, Azula began to vary her attacks more. By the final seconds, they were exchanging strikes evenly. Stop, I said sharply. Second round complete. Both were breathing heavier now, sweat visible along their hairlines. Zuko, strong improvement in initiative. Azula, you adapted well, but your footwork slowed slightly at the end. Azula gave a small nod. Zuko straightened his back, listening closely. After another short rest, I stepped between them once more. Final round, give everything you have left. But remember, control. They took their stances. Begin. The third round started with both moving at the same moment, Zuko aiming low, Azula striking high. Their attacks passed each other without landing, and they immediately adjusted. Azula pressed forward with a strong burst of blue fire, Zuko blocked with crossed arms, and countered with a forward kick that made her step back. Good pressure, I called. The pace stayed high for the full 2 minutes. Each landed small hits, nothing too strong, but enough to show openings. Neither slowed down until I called, stop. They both stood in place, breathing hard, sweat running down their faces. I stepped forward, my voice clear and firm. You both fought with focus, skill, and respect for the rules. This is the kind of training that builds true strength. Zuko nodded once. It was harder than I thought. Yes. Because you had to think and move at the same time. Azula smirked slightly. He's getting better. I looked at her directly. And so are you. We walked together toward the palace. The morning sun was higher now, its heat beginning to spread across the courtyards. Inside, the cooler air of the halls greeted us. The midday meal was waiting: rice, grilled meat, and steamed greens. I ate with my usual speed, speaking loudly after the first bite. This is delicious. Zuko shook his head but smiled faintly. Azula remained composed, but her eyes flicked toward her brother with something that might have been a small measure of approval. The duel had done its work. They had tested each other without anger, and they had both learned from it. That was a victory for the day. Chapter 8, Summoned to the War Room. The palace was quiet when I woke. The sun had only just begun to rise, its light faint against the stone walls of my chamber. I dressed in formal attire instead of my usual training tunic, a deep red robe trimmed in gold, the belt tied firmly at my waist. My boots were polished, my hair tied back, though the red-tipped strands still spread outward as they always did. Today would not be spent in the training yard. As I stepped into the corridor, a palace attendant bowed deeply. "Prince Kyojuro, the Fire Lord requests your presence in the war room at the second bell." "Excellent. I shall be there," I answered without hesitation. The attendant straightened. "You may wish to take the formal route through the East Wing, my prince. It is customary for the first visit." "I understand." I walked toward the dining hall first, stopping for breakfast. Zuko and Azula were already seated. Bowls of rice, grilled eel, and steamed vegetables were set before us. "Father has summoned me to the war room today," I announced as I sat down. Zuko looked up sharply. "Really? You've never been there before?" "Correct. This will be my first time." Azula's eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion but in thought. "He must think you're ready to see more of the war's plans." "Then I shall listen closely and speak clearly," I replied, lifting my chopsticks. We ate quickly. I finished first, as always, and rose from the table. "Train well this morning. I will return with news." The east wing of the palace was quiet compared to the busier central halls. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and the incense burned in the nearby shrine rooms. Guards stood at each corner, their armor clean and their stances steady. The doors to the war room were large, made of dark wood reinforced with bronze plates. 2 royal guards stood at either side. "Prince Kyojuro," one said, bowing slightly. I returned the nod. "I have been summoned." They pushed the doors open. The war room was a wide, rectangular chamber. A large table dominated the center, its surface carved with a detailed map of the Earth Kingdom and Fire Nation territories. Small, carved pieces marked fleets, armies, and strongholds. Scrolls were stacked neatly at one end. Fire Lord Ozai stood at the head of the table. His posture was upright, his hands resting lightly on the edge. Several generals and ministers were present, their heads turning toward me as I entered. "Prince Kyojuro," Ozai said evenly. "Join us." I stepped forward with firm strides, stopping to the right of the Fire Lord. "I am ready to listen and learn." One of the generals, a tall man with a thin mustache, gestured to the map. "We are discussing the movement of our southern fleets, my prince. Supplies must be maintained for the colonies along the western coast of the Earth Kingdom." I leaned forward slightly to study the map. Supplies are the foundation of any long campaign. Without them, even the strongest force will slow. A few heads turned at my volume, but no one objected. Another general spoke, pointing to a series of marked lines along the coast. "We are increasing patrols here to intercept any water tribe vessels attempting to interfere." "Excellent. Preventing interference will keep our routes secure," I said firmly. Ozai's gaze flicked toward me briefly before returning to the table. "And the garrisons?" A minister unrolled a scroll. "Garrisons in the southern colonies report stable conditions, Fire Lord. There is minor unrest in the eastern mining settlements, but nothing requiring full military action." I straightened. Minor unrest can grow if ignored. Small problems should be dealt with quickly. One of the generals nodded in agreement. "A fair point. The discussion moved to fleet rotations, siege preparations, and resource allocation. I listened closely, committing each detail to memory. When a general mentioned the possibility of reinforcing a key port, I spoke without hesitation. Reinforcements will not only defend the port, they will raise morale among the troops and civilians there. The general gave a short nod. Yes, my prince. Throughout the meeting, Ozai remained focused, speaking only when necessary to direct the discussion. He neither praised nor criticized my contributions, but I noted that he did not interrupt them. After some time, the conversation shifted to long-term strategy. A large section of the Earth Kingdom map was cleared, and new markers were placed. This, a general explained, is the projected campaign for the next 2 years. It will require coordination between multiple fleets and army divisions. I studied the arrangement. Coordination will decide success or failure. Communication between units must be constant. Another general smirked faintly. You speak like a soldier, Prince Kyojuro. Because the principles are the same. Whether with a sword or a fleet, discipline and coordination win the day. A few ministers exchanged glances, but the tone in the room remained serious. When the final matters were addressed, Ozai straightened. This meeting is concluded. Leave the reports. The generals and ministers bowed before filing out. I remained where I stood until the doors closed behind them. Ozai turned to me. You listened. You spoke when you had something to add. That is how you will learn. Understood. I replied. I will continue to listen and learn until I can contribute even more. He gave the smallest nod. You may go. I bowed deeply before leaving the room. The corridors outside were quieter now. My steps were steady as I returned toward the central palace. The midday sun shone through the high windows, casting light across the polished floors. Zuko and Azula were in the smaller training hall when I arrived, practicing footwork drills. They stopped when they saw me. How was it? Zuko asked. Instructive. I said. I saw the scope of our war efforts and learned how our armies and fleets are coordinated. Azula tilted her head. Did father say anything to you? He said that I listened and spoke well and that I will learn more in time. Zuko gave a small smile. Sounds like it went well. It did. And tomorrow, we train as usual. That night, as I prepared for rest, I thought back on the war room, the carved map, the movement markers, the steady voices of the generals. It was different from the training yard, but it was another battlefield in its own way, one where decisions were made that shaped the world beyond the palace walls. I intended to return there again. And when I did, I would bring more than just my voice, I would bring ideas that could make a difference. Chapter 9, The Palace Guard Drill. The palace bell rang out in the early morning, its tone steady and deep. I was already awake. I rose from my bedding in one movement, tied my hair back, and fastened my training clothes, light but reinforced red tunic, gold belt and forearm guards. My boots were laced tightly. Today would not be a simple training day. Today, Zuko, Azula, and I would face the palace guard in a combat drill. As I stepped into the corridor, I saw 2 guards waiting. Both bowed quickly. Prince Kyojuro, one said, the captain of the guard has prepared the yard for the drill. Excellent. I replied, my voice carrying. Bring Prince Zuko and Princess Azula when they are ready. Yes, my prince. I made my way toward the eastern yard. The air was still cool, but the heat from the rising sun was beginning to touch the stones. When I arrived, the space had been cleared. Training dummies were pushed to the far wall. 6 palace guards in full armor stood in formation, their captain at the front. The captain bowed. Prince Kyojuro. We have arranged a 3-on-6 exercise, as requested. The guards will use controlled strikes and non-lethal force. Good. We shall do the same. Within minutes, Zuko and Azula arrived. Zuko looked alert but wary. Azula's gaze moved over the guards, calm and assessing. What's the plan? Zuko asked. We will face them as a unit, I said. You will fight with control, just as we practice. Azula, you will cover the flanks. Zuko, you will watch for openings and press them when they appear. I will take the front and draw their attention. Azula smirked faintly. So you get to be the shield? Yes. And I expect you both to be the striking edge. The captain stepped forward. When you give the signal, we begin. I turned to my siblings. Are you ready? Zuko nodded. Ready. Azula's smirk widened slightly. Of course. I raised my arm. Begin. The guards advanced in a steady line, shields up, spears in hand. The clack of their boots against the stone was even and measured. I stepped forward first, releasing a short burst of flame toward the center guard to force him to raise his shield. Move with me, I called. Azula broke left, sending a sharp arc of blue fire toward a guard's side. Zuko moved right, aiming low with a burst of orange flame. The guards reacted quickly, one lowering his shield to block Zuko's strike while another turned to intercept Azula. I pressed forward, closing the distance, and knocked aside a spear thrust with my forearm guard. My counter-strike forced the guard to take a step back, breaking their line. Now, Zuko! I barked. Zuko stepped in, striking at the exposed side of the guard who had retreated. Azula followed with a precise shot that clipped another's shoulder. The guards regrouped quickly, circling to try and close us in. They pressed harder in the second exchange. One swung his spear toward my leg, but I caught the shaft and pushed it aside, stepping forward with a controlled strike that forced him back again. Keep moving, I called to my siblings. Azula slipped past one guard's flank, landing a light kick before pivoting away from his counter. Zuko took a glancing strike to his forearm but stayed in the fight, driving his opponent back with a short burst of fire. The first minute ended with 3 guards holding the line and 3 repositioning to attack from the sides. Regroup, I ordered. We moved back 2 paces to reset our stance. The captain called out, second phase. The guards advanced again, faster this time. Their strikes came from multiple directions, 2 from the front, 2 from each side. I blocked and deflected at the front while Zuko intercepted one on the right. Azula spun sharply, her flames forcing her opponent to retreat. A spear came in low toward me. I stepped over it, pivoted, and knocked the guard back with my shoulder. Zuko, left side, I called. He moved immediately, covering the gap before Azula stepped in with a follow-up strike. By the end of the second phase, we had forced the guards back into a tighter formation. The captain gave the signal for the final phase. All in. The guards came at us together. This time, I advanced instead of waiting, forcing their center to break apart. Zuko and Azula matched my movement, hitting the sides hard. The exchange was fast blocks, counters, quick strikes. I caught a spear shaft, twisted it from the guard's hands, and tossed it aside before stepping back to my siblings. Well done, I called. The captain stepped forward, raising a hand. End drill. The guards lowered their weapons and bowed. Thank you, my prince, the captain said. Your coordination was impressive. Thank you, I replied. Your defense was strong. You made us work for every opening. Azula gave a small nod to the guards. Better than I expected. Zuko was breathing hard but smiling faintly. That was, actually good practice. I clapped him on the back. Yes. Practice against real opponents sharpens our skills. We thanked the captain again before leaving the yard. The walk back to the palace was steady, the three of us moving side by side. Inside the dining hall, the midday meal was already being set: bowls of rice, roasted duck, and vegetables. We sat together, and I began eating with my usual speed. "This is delicious," I said after the first mouthful. Zuko shook his head but smiled. Azula kept her expression composed, though her eyes moved briefly toward her brother, perhaps noting his improved performance in the drill. Chapter 10, The Fire Lord's Assessment. The morning bell had not yet rung when I woke. My chambers were dim, the light from the small window faint against the walls. I rose at once, washed, and dressed in formal red robes with gold trim. The belt was tied firmly at my waist. My hair was tied back, though as always, the red-tipped ends would not lie flat. I intended to begin the day in the training yard, but before I could leave, a knock sounded on my door. "Enter," I called. A palace attendant stepped inside and bowed deeply. "Prince Kyojuro, the Fire Lord requests your presence in his audience chamber immediately. You are to come alone." "Understood," I answered without hesitation. "I shall go at once." The attendant stepped aside as I left the room. My footsteps were firm along the polished corridors. The air smelled faintly of burning incense from the shrine rooms. Guards were posted at each corner, all straightened and bowed as I passed. The audience chamber was large and open, with high ceilings supported by carved red pillars. The great brazier at the far end burned steadily. Fire Lord Ozai sat on the raised throne, his posture upright, his gaze fixed forward. 2 guards stood near the base of the steps. When I approached, they moved aside without a word. I stopped at the foot of the stairs and bowed deeply. "Father! You summoned me." Ozai studied me for a moment before speaking. "Rise." I straightened immediately. "I have observed your conduct in the palace," he said. "You have trained your siblings with intensity. You have spoken in the war room without hesitation. You have participated in drills against my guards. You are making yourself noticeable. It is my duty to grow stronger and to make my siblings stronger," I replied clearly. His gaze did not shift. "Tell me, Kyojuro, why do you place such focus on training with them?" "Because a strong family makes a strong nation," I answered without pause. Zuko and Azula will face many challenges. I intend for them to be ready for all of them. Ozai's eyes narrowed slightly. "And if one sibling's strength surpasses the others, then that sibling must be ready to lead and the other must be ready to follow without resentment," I said, my voice steady. "Both will still serve the Fire Nation." There was a pause. The crackle of the brazier was the only sound. "You speak with certainty," Ozai said finally. "But certainty is meaningless without results. Do you believe your training has produced them?" "Yes," I replied firmly. Zuko's stance is stronger, his footwork more stable. Azula's precision is even greater than before, and she can now work alongside her brother effectively when required. Ozai regarded me for a long moment. "You take credit for this improvement." "I take responsibility for it," I said. "But the credit belongs to them. They put in the effort." The faintest shift in Ozai's posture told me he had noted the distinction. He rose from the throne and descended the steps slowly, his gaze never leaving mine. "Standing before me," he said, "you have shown discipline. You have shown initiative. But discipline and initiative are not enough. A prince must also understand the political weight of his position." "Then I shall learn it," I said immediately. "You will," Ozai replied. "You will attend the next series of war room meetings. Not as a silent observer, but as one who will be asked for judgment. Your words will carry weight and they will be remembered." "I accept this responsibility," I answered loudly. Ozai studied me for another moment before turning back toward the throne. "You may go. Continue your training. Continue producing results. If you do, you will be given greater responsibilities. I bowed once more. I will not fail. The corridors outside the audience chamber were quieter than usual. My footsteps echoed softly as I made my way back toward the training wing. When I entered the smaller training hall, Zuko and Azula were already there, working through basic fire-bending sequences. They stopped when they saw me. "Where were you?" Zuko asked. "With father," I said. "He has given me new responsibilities. I will speak in the war room as one whose words matter." Zuko looked surprised. "Really? That's big." "Yes. NIT is a sign that our training is noticed." Azula tilted her head slightly. "He must think you're worth listening to." "Then I shall prove him right," I replied. We trained for the rest of the morning stance drills, quick strike exchanges, and paired defense exercises. I corrected Zuko's hand position twice, reminding him to keep his guard higher. I adjusted Azula's pivot on one sequence to give her a faster return to stance. After several rounds of sparring, I called a halt. "Excellent work. You are both stronger than last week." Azula smirked faintly. "Maybe next week we'll be stronger than you." "If you are, I will consider it a success," I said without hesitation. Zuko gave a short laugh, shaking his head. At midday, we went together to the dining hall. The servants set down bowls of rice, steamed greens, and grilled fish. I ate quickly, speaking after the first mouthful. "This is delicious." Zuko rolled his eyes but smiled faintly. Azula focused on her food, though I caught her glancing toward me when she thought I wasn't looking. She was curious about the meeting both of them were, but they knew I would tell them what mattered. When the meal was finished, I stood. "Rest this afternoon. Tomorrow we train again." That night, as I sat in my chambers, I thought about Ozai's words. He had not given praise, but he had given responsibility, and in this palace, that meant trust, however cautious. I would meet his expectations. And I would ensure that when the day came for me to speak in the war room, my words would not only be heard, they would be acted upon. Chapter 11, Speaking in the War Room. The morning began quietly. The palace bell had not yet rung when I rose from my bedding. I dressed in formal red robes with gold trim, the belt tied neatly at my waist. My boots were polished, my hair tied back, though the red-tipped ends still flared outward no matter how I combed them. Today was my first day speaking in the war room, not as an observer, but as one expected to contribute to the Fire Nation's plans. When I stepped into the corridor, a palace attendant was already waiting. "Prince Kyojuro," he said, bowing, "the Fire Lord has called the war room to convene at the second bell. You are to be present." "Excellent. I shall be ready," I replied firmly. I made my way to the dining hall for breakfast. Zuko and Azula were already there. Bowls of rice, grilled fish, and steamed greens had been set before us. "I will speak in the war room today," I announced as I sat down. Zuko looked up quickly. "So this is the meeting father mentioned?" "Yes. I will be asked for my judgment on a strategic matter." Azula took a sip of tea. "Then make sure it's the right judgment." "It will be," I said without hesitation. We ate in steady silence after that. I finished first, as always, and rose from the table. "Train hard this morning. I will return with news." The eastern wing of the palace was quiet. Guards stood at every corner, their armor polished, their stances still. The war room doors were large, bronze-plated, and carved with the emblem of the Fire Nation. 2 guards pushed them open at my approach. Inside, the table map dominated the room. Detailed carvings marked coastlines, mountains, and major cities of the Earth Kingdom. Small carved pieces in red lacquer represented Fire Nation forces' fleets, garrisons, and columns of soldiers. Fire Lord Ozai stood at the head of the table. Generals and ministers were already in place, their attention shifting toward me as I entered. Prince Kyojuro, Ozai said evenly, take your place. I moved to stand on his right side, my back straight, my eyes on the map. I am ready. The meeting began with reports. A general pointed to the southern coast of the Earth Kingdom. Our patrol fleets have intercepted several water tribe vessels attempting to deliver supplies to coastal towns. However, the southern approach remains vulnerable. Another general tapped the map near the city of Jailing. Intelligence reports increased Earth Kingdom activity in this region. They are fortifying supply depots and reinforcing walls. Ozai's eyes moved across the map. What is your proposal? The first general replied, we could increase naval patrols in the south, but that would draw ships away from the blockade of Ba Sing Se. A minister interjected, alternatively, we could shift more troops to the Jailing region to cut off the reinforcements entirely. That would slow their supply chain. Ozai listened in silence for a moment before turning to me. Kyojuro. You have heard the situation. Speak. All eyes turned toward me. I studied the map closely. The enemy is moving supplies through Jailing and reinforcing their walls, I said, my voice steady and loud. If we leave them, they will only grow stronger. But if we weaken our naval patrols too much, the water tribe will slip through. The generals watched me, waiting. Therefore, I continued, I propose we do both but in smaller steps. Send a single additional battalion to Jailing to test their defenses. At the same time, increase southern patrols only for a short period long enough to deter the water tribe without pulling too many ships away from the blockade. One general frowned slightly. A limited increase in both operations, it could work, but would it have enough impact? Yes. I replied without hesitation. Because it allows us to pressure the enemy in two places without overextending. If Jailing's defenses are weaker than they appear, the battalion can push harder. If they are strong, we withdraw before we lose men needlessly. There was a moment of silence. Then another general nodded. A measured probe could give us clearer intelligence without committing too much too soon. Ozai's gaze stayed on me. And if both operations show success, then we press the advantage immediately, I said. With prepared forces, not rushed ones. A minister spoke quietly. It is a cautious but potentially effective approach. Ozai looked around the table. Are there objections? None were raised. Then it is decided, Ozai said. He turned to me. Your proposal will be executed. You will review the results when the reports return. I accept this task. I said firmly. The meeting continued for another hour. Other matters were discussed: troop movements in the colonies, supply lines for the northern fleets, and the construction of new warships. I listened carefully, speaking only when asked for input. When the final matter was addressed, Ozai dismissed the room. The generals and ministers bowed before filing out. I remained in place until the doors closed behind them. Ozai regarded me for a moment. You spoke with clarity. Your suggestion was practical. Continue to show this level of judgment, and you will be given greater influence. Understood. I will continue to listen, learn, and speak with purpose. He gave a small nod before turning toward the far side of the chamber. You may go. I bowed deeply. I will return to training. The corridors outside the war room were still quiet. My steps were steady as I made my way toward the central palace. When I reached the smaller training hall, Zuko and Azula were there, working through sparring sequences. How did it go? Zuko asked. Successfully, I said. I proposed a plan that was accepted and will be put into action. Zuko's eyebrows rose. Really? It is because of our training. I interrupted. A clear mind and a strong body make decisive thinking possible. Azula smirked faintly. If father accepted your plan, it must have been sound. It was. And we will continue our work so that we are ready when called. We trained together for the rest of the morning, the movements steady and deliberate. My thoughts, however, returned often to the war room. This was only the first time I had spoken with authority there, but it would not be the last. Chapter 12, Journey to the Southern Colony. The morning began earlier than usual. The palace bell had not yet rung when I rose from my bedding. I dressed in my travel attire, a deep red robe reinforced with light armor plates beneath, gold-trimmed belt, and sturdy boots suitable for long marches. My hair was tied back firmly, though the red-tipped ends still spread outward. I had been ordered to travel to one of the Fire Nation's southern colonies to observe conditions firsthand. The trip would be my first time leaving the palace since childhood. When I stepped into the corridor, a palace attendant bowed. Prince Kyojuro, the Fire Lord requests that you leave within the hour. Your escort is already assembled in the main courtyard. Excellent. I shall not keep them waiting. I replied at once. I went first to the dining hall for breakfast. Zuko and Azula were there already, their plates filled with rice and steamed vegetables. Brother, sister, I said loudly as I entered. Today I travel to the southern colony. Zuko's head came up quickly. You're leaving the palace? Yes. I will observe conditions and report directly to father. Azula took a sip of tea. You must be careful. Some of those settlements have unrest. I shall be ready for any trouble. I replied with certainty. We ate together for the last time before my departure. I finished quickly and rose from the table. Train well while I am gone. I expect to see improvement when I return. The main courtyard was busy when I arrived. 10 soldiers stood ready, their armor polished, their stances straight. 2 ostrich horses were harnessed to a small carriage designed for long travel, with supplies secured in the rear compartment. The captain of the escort stepped forward. Prince Kyojuro, we are prepared to depart, he said, bowing. Excellent. Let us move out. I climbed into the carriage, the captain taking the seat across from me. At my signal, the driver urged the ostrich horses forward. The palace gates opened, and we moved out into the streets of the Fire Nation capital. The city was already waking. Merchants opened their stalls, soldiers on patrol nodded as we passed, and smoke rose steadily from the forges in the industrial quarter. Beyond the city, the road turned south, following the curve of the coastline. The morning air was cool, carrying the distant smell of the sea. For the first few hours, the land was familiar: rolling hills, small farming villages, and stretches of open grassland. Soldiers rode in formation beside the carriage, their eyes scanning the road ahead. Around midday, we stopped at a rest station, a walled outpost with a small barracks and stables. The captain ordered the soldiers to water the ostrich horses while I stepped down to stretch my legs. Travel is good for the body and the mind, I said to the captain. He nodded. It also shows the people that the royal family takes interest in their welfare, my prince. We continued south after a short meal. The terrain changed gradually, the hills flattened, the soil turned darker, and we began to see more Earth Kingdom-style buildings mixed with Fire Nation construction. By late afternoon, the colony's main settlement came into view. It was surrounded by a low wall of stone and timber. Inside, I could see market stalls, smithies, and clusters of houses with red-tiled roofs. The carriage passed through the gate after the captain presented our credentials. The streets were busy: Fire Nation soldiers on patrol, traders calling out their goods, and children running between stalls. I noted that many of the people were Earth Kingdom natives wearing Fire Nation-style clothing. We stopped before the Governor's Hall, a 2-story building with Fire Nation banners hanging from its facade. The governor, a middle-aged man in formal robes, came forward to greet me. "Prince Kyojuro, welcome to the southern colony," he said, bowing deeply. "I am pleased to be here," I replied. "I have come to observe conditions and hear reports directly." He led me inside to a meeting chamber where maps and ledgers were laid out on a long table. "We have enjoyed relative stability," the governor began, "but there have been incidents of resistance in outlying villages. Nothing large, but enough to require extra patrols. Resistance should be dealt with swiftly but with care to avoid unnecessary damage," I said. He nodded. "We have also increased production at the mines, but that has strained our transport capacity. Some supplies are delayed reaching the capital." "Supplies are the blood of an army, they must flow without interruption," I stated. "Have you requested additional transport from the military command?" "Yes, my prince. We await approval." After the meeting, I walked through the marketplace with a small escort. Merchants called out their goods: Fire Nation steel tools, Earth Kingdom grown produce, imported spices. I stopped at one stall selling roasted meat skewers. "This smells delicious," I said. The merchant, startled, bowed quickly and offered one. I accepted and ate it on the spot. "Excellent." Several townspeople gathered nearby, whispering quietly. I greeted them directly. "Your work and trade keep this settlement strong." Some bowed, others smiled faintly before returning to their business. That evening, the governor hosted a formal dinner in my honor. The table was set with roasted duck, steamed greens, and rice. Officers of the local garrison attended, along with a few merchants and town officials. During the meal, I asked the garrison commander about patrols. He reported that they maintained a steady presence along the roads but sometimes faced hostility from remote farming communities. "Hostility can be reduced by respect, but respect must be paired with strength," I told him. "Show them you can defend and also provide." The commander nodded in agreement. That night, I stayed in the governor's hall. My quarters were simple but clean. Before sleeping, I reviewed the day's notes in my mind: increased mining output, minor unrest in outlying villages, transport delays, and generally stable conditions in the main settlement. The next morning, I departed after breakfast. The governor and his staff bowed as I mounted the carriage. "I will report to father that this colony is stable but requires additional transport and continued patrols," I declared. The journey back was steady. By the time the palace came into view, the sun was setting. Inside the palace, I went straight to the audience chamber. Ozai was there, speaking quietly with a minister. When he saw me, he gestured for me to approach. I bowed deeply. "Father, I have returned from the southern colony." "Report," he said simply. "The main settlement is stable. There is minor unrest in outlying villages, nothing that cannot be controlled. Mining output has increased, but transport delays limit supply flow. I recommend approving additional transport and maintaining strong patrols." Ozai considered my words for a moment, then nodded. "Your report is clear. I will see that the matter of transport is addressed." "Thank you, father," I said firmly. "You may go," he replied. I left the chamber and made my way toward the smaller training hall. Zuko and Azula were there. "How was it?" Zuko asked. "The colony is strong, but like all things, it can be made stronger," I replied. Azula raised an eyebrow. "And father listened to your report?" "Yes. He will act on it." Zuko gave a small nod. "Then it was worth the trip." "It was," I said, stepping forward. "And tomorrow, we train harder than ever." Chapter 13, Urgent Summons. The morning bell had not yet rung when I woke. I rose from my bedding, dressed in a plain red tunic for training, and tied my hair back. My plan was to meet Zuko and Azula in the eastern yard for sparring. Before I could leave my chambers, there was a sharp knock at the door. "Enter," I called. A palace attendant stepped in, bowed deeply, and spoke quickly. "Prince Kyojuro, the Fire Lord requires your immediate presence in the war room. It is an urgent matter." "Excellent. I shall go at once," I replied without hesitation. The attendant stepped aside, and I strode into the corridor. Guards straightened as I passed, their eyes following me. The air was cooler than usual, the stone floors still holding the night's chill. The bronze-plated doors of the war room stood open. Inside, the table map was already surrounded by generals and ministers. Fire Lord Ozai stood at the head of the table, his posture upright, his eyes fixed on the southern section of the map. I stepped forward and bowed deeply. "Father! You summoned me." Ozai's gaze shifted to me. "Kyojuro! You returned from the southern colony yesterday. This morning, we received new reports that changed the situation." I moved to stand at his right side. "What has occurred?" One of the generals answered. "An outlying village in the southern colony was attacked during the night. Several supply carts were burned. Witnesses claim the attackers were Earth Kingdom rebels." Another general added, "The garrison responded, but the rebels had already withdrawn into the hills. They know the terrain well. This is the third such attack in the past 2 months." I studied the map, noting the marked location of the attacked village. "This village was peaceful when I was there," I said firmly. "The unrest I reported has escalated." Ozai's voice was calm but direct. "You spoke to the garrison commander. What is your assessment now?" I answered without hesitation. "The garrison is disciplined but spread too thin. Their patrols cover the roads but not the hill passes. The rebels are using those passes to strike and escape." The general nearest me frowned. "You suggest expanding patrols into the hills? That would require more men." "Yes," I replied. "More men and more scouts. The hills give cover to small groups, but if we place watch posts along the higher ridges, we can see them coming before they strike." A minister looked at me. "And how would you protect those posts from being targeted?" "With rotating guard shifts and signal fires," I said. "If a post is attacked, the nearest patrol will move immediately. Speed will be our defense." Ozai considered this. "And what of the villagers?" "They should see our presence every day," I answered. "When people see the Fire Nation's strength, they are less likely to aid our enemies." One general nodded slowly. "Visible strength paired with faster response, it could work." Another said, "It would require additional supplies for the posts." "Yes, but that cost is small compared to losing supply lines entirely," I stated. Ozai's eyes moved between the generals. "Are there objections?" None spoke. "Then it will be done," Ozai said. He turned to me. "You will accompany the reinforcement detachment to the southern colony. You will oversee the placement of these watch posts and report back on their effectiveness." "I accept this responsibility," I replied firmly. The meeting continued with discussion of troop movements and supply allocations. I remained silent unless addressed, listening closely as the details of the reinforcement plan were decided. The orders would be sent today, and the detachment would depart within 2 days. When the meeting ended, Ozai looked at me once more. "You gave a clear assessment based on first-hand knowledge. That is why you are being sent. Do not waste this opportunity." "Understood. I will see the task completed." I left the war room and walked toward the smaller training hall. Zuko and Azula were there, sparring under instructor Lee's supervision. They stopped when they saw me. "You missed training this morning," Zuko said. "I was summoned to the war room," I replied. "The southern colony I visited yesterday has suffered a rebel attack. Azula's eyes narrowed slightly. So father's sending you back? Yes. I will lead the placement of new watch posts and oversee the reinforcement of the garrison. Zuko tilted his head. Sounds like you'll be gone for a while. Until the task is done, I said. Instructor Lee stepped forward. This will be a test of more than your combat skill, my prince. Securing the colony will require discipline and patience. And I have both. I replied without hesitation. We trained together for the rest of the morning light sparring and coordinated defense drills. My mind, however, remained on the task ahead. At midday, I met with the captain of the guard who would lead the reinforcement detachment. We reviewed the maps from the war room, marking potential watch post locations along the hill passes. The captain agreed with my plan for signal fires and rotating guard shifts. By the afternoon, preparations had already begun. Extra rations were being loaded, new signal fire braziers were being crafted, and additional scouts were assigned to the mission. That evening, I dined with Zuko and Azula. The table was set with roasted duck, rice, and steamed vegetables. I leave again in 2 days, I said after the first bite. Train well while I am gone. Zuko gave a small nod. We will. Azula smirked faintly. Don't let the rebels make a fool of you. They will not, I said firmly. When I returned to my chambers that night, I reviewed the map of the southern colony again in my mind. I would return there not as a visitor, but as one responsible for improving its defenses. The rebels had struck once. They would not find it so easy the next time. Chapter 14, The Fire Lord's Direct Orders. The day before my departure for the southern colony began like any other. I rose before the palace bell, dressed in my training clothes, and joined Zuko and Azula in the eastern yard. We trained for several hours footwork drills, precision strikes, and short sparring sessions. I corrected Zuko's stance twice and adjusted Azula's follow-through on a kick to give her faster recovery. By midday, we returned to the palace for the noon meal. Bowls of rice, roasted eel, and steamed greens were set before us. I ate quickly, as always. Train well while I am away, I said firmly between bites. I expect progress upon my return. Zuko nodded. We'll keep at it. Azula smirked faintly. We'll be better than you by the time you come back. If you are, I will call it success, I replied without hesitation. That evening, as I was finishing a set of conditioning exercises in my chambers, a knock sounded at the door. Enter, I called. A palace attendant stepped in, bowed deeply, and spoke clearly. Prince Kyojuro, the Fire Lord requests your presence in his private audience chamber. He wishes to speak to you before your departure. Excellent. I shall go immediately. I changed into formal red robes with gold trim, tied my hair back neatly, and made my way through the palace corridors. The air was still, the sound of my boots on polished stone the only noise. Guards stood at each corner, saluting as I passed. The private audience chamber was smaller than the main hall but still imposing. 2 tall braziers burned steadily on either side of the Fire Lord's seat. Ozai sat waiting, his hands resting lightly on the armrests. There were no ministers or generals present, only the 2 guards stationed by the door. I stopped at the center of the room and bowed deeply. Father, you requested my presence. Ozai's eyes held mine for a long moment before he spoke. Rise. I straightened immediately. You leave tomorrow with the reinforcement detachment, he said. This mission is not merely about placing watch posts in the hills. It is about understanding the importance of what you are protecting. I am ready to learn and to carry out this duty, I replied without hesitation. Ozai stood and stepped down from the dais, his gaze fixed on me. The southern colony you visited is one of our oldest holdings in the Earth Kingdom. It supplies metal from its mines, grain from its farms, and soldiers from its people. Without it, our presence in the southern Earth Kingdom would be weaker. Then it must be protected at all costs. I said loudly. Yes, Ozai replied. But protection does not only mean defense. It means ensuring loyalty. The rebels striking from the hills are not only trying to destroy supplies. They are trying to make the villagers doubt our strength. If they succeed, they will gain more support, and their attacks will grow. Then I shall ensure that the villagers see our strength daily. I stated. Our presence will leave no room for doubt. Ozai studied me for a moment. Good. You understand. But remember, strength without discipline becomes recklessness. I expect your patrols and watch posts to be effective, not wasteful. Every man you lose without reason weakens us. I will not waste the lives of our soldiers. I said firmly. He circled slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. You have shown the ability to speak decisively in the war room. This will be your chance to show that your decisions in the field are equally sound. If you succeed, it will be noted. If you fail, it will also be noted. I shall succeed, I declared. Ozai stopped in front of me. Then you leave tomorrow at first light. Travel quickly. Begin the work immediately upon arrival. When your task is complete, you will return directly here and report to me in person. Understood. I replied, bowing deeply again. I will carry out this mission without delay. Ozai turned away and ascended the steps to his seat. You may go. Rest tonight. You will need your full strength. I shall. I said, stepping back before turning to leave. The walk back to my chambers was quiet. The corridors were lit by the warm glow of wall-mounted lamps, and the distant sound of soldiers changing guard echoed faintly. When I reached my chambers, I changed back into lighter clothes and sat at my desk. I reviewed in my mind the key points of Ozai's words: protect the colony, ensure loyalty, act with discipline, and return with results. Before sleeping, I went to the smaller training hall. Zuko was there, working through basic fire-bending sequences. He looked up when I entered. Couldn't sleep, he asked. I came to remind you of tomorrow, I said. I leave at first light. He gave a short nod. I'll keep training. Good. Keep your stance strong and your strikes clean. Azula entered a moment later, raising an eyebrow. Making last-minute speeches. Yes. Because they matter. I replied. When I return, I expect to see you both stronger. She smirked faintly but said nothing more. We trained lightly for an hour, nothing to exhaust me before the journey, but enough to ensure they ended the day with good form. When we were done, I clapped each of them on the shoulder. Remember, a strong body and a clear mind make victory possible. That night, I slept without disturbance. At dawn, the palace bell rang. I rose, dressed in my travel armor, and tied my hair back. The main courtyard was ready, the ostrich horses harnessed to the carriage, soldiers lined up in formation, and the captain of the detachment waiting. Zuko and Azula stood nearby. Safe travels, Zuko said. Return with results, Azula added. I shall. I replied loudly. Train hard until I return. I stepped into the carriage, the captain giving the signal. The ostrich horses moved forward, and the gates opened. The mission had begun. Chapter 15, Southbound with the Detachment. The palace bell rang in the first light of morning. I was already dressed in my travel armor, reinforced red robes with gold trim, light enough for movement yet strong enough for protection. My belt was tied firmly, my boots laced tightly, and my hair bound back. When I stepped into the main courtyard, the reinforcement detachment stood ready. 20 soldiers in full armor were arranged in formation. Their spears and swords were clean, their stances steady. 2 ostrich horse-drawn carriages held supplies, food, water, signal fire braziers, and tools for building the watch posts. The captain stepped forward and bowed. "Prince Kyojuro, we are prepared to depart." "Excellent," I replied, my voice carrying across the courtyard. "Let us begin our mission without delay." I saw Zuko and Azula standing at the edge of the courtyard. "Train hard until I return," I called to them. Zuko gave a short nod. Azula smirked faintly. "Bring back good news." "I shall," I declared. The gates opened, and the ostrich horses began to move. The soldiers fell into marching formation, 10 ahead of the carriage, 10 behind. I sat in the lead carriage beside the captain, facing forward. We passed through the capital's streets as the city stirred to life. Merchants were opening their stalls, carts of fresh produce moved toward the market, and patrols of Fire Nation soldiers nodded as we went by. The road south curved along the coastline, giving occasional views of the sea. The first hours were steady. The captain briefed me on the route. "We will reach the mid-route outpost by midday, my prince. From there, we will continue to the southern colony without stopping for the night unless ordered otherwise." "Good," I said. "The faster we arrive, the faster we can begin securing the hills." By the third hour, the road passed through farmland, fields of grain already showing signs of the season's growth. Farmers paused in their work to watch our detachment pass, some bowing slightly. I returned each with a nod. "The loyalty of the people is a strength as important as any wall," I said to the captain. He agreed. "And it is loyalty we must maintain. Rebel attacks aim to weaken it." We stopped briefly at a riverside station to water the ostrich horses and allow the soldiers to refill their canteens. The station commander, a grizzled man with years of service, greeted me with a sharp bow. "Prince Kyojuro, it is an honor." "The honor is mine," I replied. "How goes your watch on this route?" "Quiet, my prince. No rebel activity here. They focus southward, near the colony." "Then keep your eyes open," I said firmly. "Trouble often comes where it is least expected." We resumed our journey. By midday, the outpost came into view, a walled compound with a central tower, manned by a small garrison. The captain ordered a short halt for food. Inside the outpost, soldiers carried bundles of arrows and crates of rations. The quartermaster provided travel meals: rice, dried meat, and pickled vegetables. I ate quickly. "Food is fuel," I said after the first bite. "A well-fed soldier is a strong soldier." Several soldiers chuckled quietly, but their posture remained disciplined. After the meal, we set off again. The road narrowed as it climbed into hill country. The terrain became rougher, the vegetation thicker. The captain pointed to the ridgelines. "These hills lead toward the passes where the rebels move. This is where your watchposts will be placed." I studied the landscape. Elevated positions with clear lines of sight. Perfect for early warning. We discussed possible placements, some near bends in the road, others on open ridges. The signal fire braziers would be spaced so that one post's light could be seen by the next, allowing quick communication back to the garrison. In the afternoon, we encountered a merchant caravan heading north. The lead merchant bowed from his ostrich horse. "Prince Kyojuro, I thank you for your visit to the colony last week. The people spoke well of it." "Good," I said. "I have returned to ensure their safety." He smiled and moved on, his caravan giving way for our detachment to pass. By late day, the land opened into a wide valley. In the distance, the colony's outer wall came into view, with Fire Nation banners flying above the gate. Smoke from forges and cooking fires rose steadily from within. The captain looked at me. "We can reach the garrison before nightfall, my prince." "Then we shall," I replied. Once there, we will begin preparations immediately. We entered through the colony's main gate as the sun lowered toward the horizon. The garrison commander was waiting, the same man I had met during my previous visit. He bowed deeply. Prince Kyojuro, welcome back. We received word of your arrival from the capital. I have returned with reinforcements and a plan to secure the hill passes, I declared. He led us into the garrison compound. Soldiers carried our supplies into the storage buildings, while others tended the ostrich horses. Inside the commander's office, maps of the surrounding region were spread across a large table. I stood over them with the commander and the captain. These areas, I said, pointing to the ridgelines, will hold our watch posts. They will see the rebels before they reach the villages. Signal fires will alert patrols instantly. The commander nodded. We will need to split the detachment into smaller units to man each post. Yes. And they will rotate to avoid fatigue. We discussed logistics for over an hour: how many men per post, supply delivery schedules, and guard shift lengths. By the end, the plan was set: the first 3 posts would be built within the next 2 days. That night, I stayed in the garrison quarters rather than the governor's hall. The soldiers seemed motivated, speaking quietly about the new plan as they prepared their gear. Before sleeping, I walked the perimeter of the garrison, checking the watch stations and greeting the night guards. Stay alert, I told each one. Your eyes protect this colony. The mission had begun in earnest. Tomorrow, we would move into the hills and start building the first watch posts. The rebels would not catch this colony off guard again.